Irene's Monday had begun as unremarkably as any other, and as the day progressed, she longed for 5 o'clock. Alone in the office, her desk cluttered with the remnants of the day's work, she was actually happy for the occasional ringing of the phone, although the calls were typically brief and equally as dull as the rest of her work. Her boss, Mr. Thompson, was a stern and reserved figure who rarely divulged the nature of his business dealings or even offered a casual conversation. But he was always polite to Irene, and he paid her well, so she had only the utmost respect for him. Mr. Thompson had already left for the day, abruptly tasking her with an odd request on his way out. He had told her to expect the arrival of a package later in the afternoon, emphasizing its crucial importance to him. He asked her to sign for it and then to place the box on his desk, being as careful as possible not to upset the contents within. Her anticipation lingered until 3:40, when a delivery person arrived with the mysterious package. Irene accepted it with a forced smile, but one end of the box had been torn and then crudely taped over, signaling rough handling during transit. Annoyed by the evident disregard for the parcel's integrity, she signed for the delivery, watching as the courier swiftly departed. She lay the box on her desk and eyed it with annoyance, wondering if the contents had suffered any damage. But outweighing her concern was her curiosity. She contemplated Mr. Thompson's cryptic instructions and also the box's mysterious origin, having no return address. The torn end of the box enticed her, but she told herself to resist the urge to investigate further, preserving the enigma wrapped within. And that's exactly what she did. For about 10 whole minutes, before succumbing to that very urge, Irene carefully peeled back the tape and lifted the loose flap of cardboard, peering inside. Within, she discovered an object meticulously cocooned in bubble wrap. Intrigued, yet cautious, she unwrapped just enough to catch a glimpse of an unusual form beneath the protective layers. She could tell only that it was a statue of some kind, and that it was made of a reddish-brown stone with light-colored veins swirled across its surface. Sensing the weight of Mr. Thompson's instructions, she decided to preserve the mystery and carried the package to her boss's office, placing it on his desk. With the box now safely in its designated spot, Irene tried to bury her curiosity beneath the weight of routine tasks. Resuming her work at the cluttered desk, the sterile hum of the office environment resumed its steady background rhythm. Her unanswered questions nagged at her, and her imagination ran wild, but she continued to push those thoughts to the recesses of her mind, allowing the day to progress while the enigmatic package waited in Mr. Thompson's office. Irene's concentration wavered, however, when she heard a single popping sound coming from the other room. At first, she dismissed it, pressing on with her work, but then there was another pop, and another, and another. She quickly stood up and took a single step toward Mr. Thompson's office, stopping again to listen. A minute passed. Hearing nothing, she returned to her desk. A rapid sequence of loud pops echoed from the room as if taunting Irene. She jumped from her seat and ran to Mr. Thompson's office, stopping just inside the doorway. There was no movement in the room, and no clear explanation for the popping, but it had been a sound she knew well. Something was causing the bubble wrap in the box to pop. Beginning to allow irrational fears to enter her mind, she cautiously crept to the box and leaned over it, looking inside again. The once secure cocoon of bubble wrap now bore an opening at the top, offering a more revealing look at the statue within. An oppressive apprehension settled over her as she hesitated, scrutinizing the uncovered portion. Devilish features carved into the visible parts of the figure intensified her growing fear. Reluctant to touch the unsettling object, Irene found herself paralyzed by a newfound anxiety. Questions and dark thoughts swirled in her mind. Why would Mr. Thompson desire such a statue, and what significance did it hold in his mysterious affairs? The ordinary office setting seemed to warp in the presence of the malevolent-looking figure concealed within the box, casting an ominous shadow over Irene's once familiar surroundings. Was that wicked-looking statue somehow causing the disturbances itself? Irene's logical brain screamed for her to return to the real world. She attempted to rationalize the noises, convincing herself that there had to be a simple explanation for all of it, attributing the sounds to the possibility of an office mouse or some other sensible problem. Resolute, Irene returned to her desk, determined to focus on work and await the end of the day. The oppressive atmosphere in the office clung to her, pushing her to finish up and leave. Yet, as she sat at her cluttered desk, the popping sounds resumed, now more intense than before. Frozen in her seat, she strained to discern anything new about the noises emanating from Mr. Thompson's office. The sounds persisted until, abruptly, the room fell silent. In that eerie stillness, a muffled thud reached Irene's ears, as if the box had toppled onto the floor. Torn between instinctive fear and a desire for rationality, Irene hesitated, her hand hovering over the phone. Uncertain of whom to call, she pondered contacting Mr. Thompson, the police, or even her husband, Ray. With a conflicted resolve, she withdrew her hand, determined to confront the situation on her own. Convincing herself that a rational explanation existed, she dismissed the idea of seeking help, fearing it might lead to an embarrassing revelation. In an attempt to regain control of her nerves, Irene forced herself back into her work, determined to dismiss the ominous thoughts lingering in her mind. As she delved into her tasks, she heard the rustling of papers in the other room, as if they had been knocked off the desk. Quickly turning toward Mr. Thompson's door, she saw one of the papers as it fluttered to the floor. Irene decided at that moment that enough was enough. She stood and walked back to the other room, determined to uncover the truth of this mystery. Stepping just inside, she cautiously inspected the room. She avoided glancing at the toppled box on the floor, her gaze shifting to the window, which was slightly ajar. She hadn't noticed it before, but Mr. Thompson had to have left it open, allowing a gust of wind to disrupt the papers, maybe even blowing the box off the desk. As swiftly as possible, she closed and locked the window, then grabbed the papers from the floor and placed them back on the desk in no particular order. Still refusing to even look at the box, Irene left the room, closing the office door behind her this time. The residual unease lingered, but with the window secured, she focused on finishing her work, her concern for the statue's condition fading in the face of her urgent desire to leave. Emboldened by her rationalization, Irene hastily completed the bare minimum of her work, yearning to escape the oppressive atmosphere that clung to the office. Hastening out of the building at last, she locked the door behind her and rushed to her car. The engine roared to life, and as she pulled away, a fleeting sense of normalcy washed over her. She could hardly wait to get home and enjoy a nice, hot bath and a glass of wine. However, as Irene merged into traffic, her nerves finally beginning to settle, a familiar and now terrifying sound echoed from the back seat.